kind of setting, right? We meet often in the fast-paced environment of us, working on the projects, getting things done. But it's good to take a step back and just reflect on how things are going, what's going well, where we need, to learn from each other. So we're, as Shireen said, we're hoping to do this more frequently in future, and I hope they're useful for you. Do sort of send us also recommendations and suggestions on the sort of sessions that would be useful to you. So, today's session, well, when we started conceptualizing the Global Hub on LLA way back in 2020, even, I think was the early days of when we started thinking about it, one of our thoughts was that what can the hub do that will be useful for communities, right? So what sort of information can we provide that would be useful for communities? So the first thing, of course, was the stories of what other people are doing in similar contexts and dealing with the same kind of climate risks. So that is what you see well reflected on the hub. But the intention always was to think through the stages of planning that a community goes through, and then to provide information for those stages of planning. And what we had done in the early days is to sort of say, would it be useful on the hub to provide information on climate impacts? And of course, like one of the first things we had to do is to look, are there other people who are doing this? If they are doing it, are they doing it in a way that serves the specific purpose that we want it for, which is for communities? And if we were to put together something like this, would it be used, right? So is there actually a demand from the community? So we got Mathematica from the US to do a scoping for us to see what's out there. And some of the questions that we put out to them was that, first of all, what are the gaps? What are the gaps for communities? What sort of data do they need? What do they find difficult to access? And what's available to them? And the second one was the willingness of community. So basically, what we also realized is that in these processes of people's adaptation planning that we do, we will be generating a huge amount of data. All of us do, right? Even in the work that you do outside of GCA on climate change adaptation, on development, a lot of the data and information that you're generating is really useful, not just to inform, future exercises in the same geographies and areas, but also as a baseline for the future. That this is what the situation was, and after all these interventions, where are we now? Have we actually managed to make a change? Are the communities more resilient? So, somewhere this data needs to be consolidated, right? And so people have easy access to it, and also that we can see over time what the impact of our activities is. So, we'd also ask them to look at the willingness of communities to be able to share the data that we generate, particularly through these people's adaptations plans in the first instance, but then inviting other organizations to also share data. So they came up with a nice, fat, long report. They spoke to all of you. I think many of you contributed as well to that. And of course, unsurprisingly, one of the first things they said to us was that, when communities think about planning for climate change, they're thinking about the here and now. They're thinking about the immediate threats that they face. And they find that they think that it's a luxury for them to be able to look 20 years in the future. If I can't get, infrastructure for water supply now, if that's not affordable, then to make it climate resilient and make that extra investment so that it stays for the next 20 years, that's for us, it's a dream. It's too much of a luxury. But then, of course, what that means, and that is happening, I think you'll agree, in many of the countries that we work in, that there's a prioritization of current immediate extreme climate impacts, so like cyclones and storm surges, etc., and the slow onset, like heat, temperature increases, and rising levels of salinity, or even sea level rise, they get deprioritized. So the slow onset impacts get deprioritized. And then, of course, if you speak to the scientists and the sort of scientific community, what they say is that you need long-term climate forecasts, and any planning that communities do needs to be based on a combination of historical data, of observational data, what communities see and feel and perceive, and also these future modeling and projections, right, of risks. But also, what there was an agreement is that the way this is currently done is it's done in a way that it doesn't necessarily at all have a role for communities. So they are just recipients of this data, but they, as all of you will have experienced in the work that we're doing together, they have a really critical role to play in the ground truthing of the data and the contextualizing of this data, right? So you may give them what a weather report will look like for a year or a forecast for a year, but it doesn't make sense to them unless they're able to contextualize it, what it means for them in terms of housing, in terms of agriculture, in terms of food security, food prices, etc., right? So also that, and this is something that has come up in every stories of resilience we've done year after year, that for communities, yes, data, but the way they use it, it's sort of very contextualized, and the importance of storytelling, of them being able to sort of speak about how they experience, right? So it's data and information that's important, and also the sort of translation of that. So often it's you may have data, but unless you have the right questions to ask, you're not going to be able to get the best benefit from that data. So that's also equally important, that there has to be a facilitation process where first communities go through a process of understanding what are the questions they need answered, and then they have the data, whether it's generated by them or it's generated by experts, to sort of help them answer those questions. Another thing that they pointed out too is that countries often have databases that they put together that are related to climate impacts, whether it's to do with, what they call vegetation indices or crop water requirement satisfaction indices, etc. But these are national databases, and they don't have the granularity or the sort of detail that is needed for local level planning. That there's often differences between, in urban areas along roads. That's where most of the data gathering takes place during censuses, etc. And so there's also rural and urban divide. And then finally, they said that globally, yes, there's a lot of data available on climate projections. But of course, other than the fact that it's, the granularity, there are other issues there, which is that it often requires specialized computer programs. It needs computing power, technical skills, it needs time, which is, at a premium at the local level. And what we talked about, that the users may also sort of need that extra help to translate that to specific contexts, right? Before they can frame the right questions. So they gave us all of this, and what they said to us is that there's a whole lot of data sources there, and what we can do is to sort of start listing them. But obviously that's not good enough, because just providing a resource. And the way we've been doing it in the people's adaptation plans right now is to have an expert from a university, which is local, because we want very much this capacity to live and reside in that area beyond projects. So we work with the local university, and what we end up with is more of a desk review, right? It's not sort of primary information and data that's being generated, but it's really a collection of what's there that you then use in your people's adaptation planning process. And so, of course, all this, when we were thinking this through, I met Salma at the CBA last year, and I thought, wow, this is exactly what we need, right? That this is what we've been talking about, what Salma has been doing in a very interesting context, by the way. It's something that we don't hear often. It's the context of sort of preserving heritage, that a lot of cultural heritage is being lost to climate change as well. So they were working on a database to inform their planning processes. So Salma will tell you more about it, but at least our first reaction was, this is something that will be very useful to our partners, right? And in the work that we do. So today's meeting is literally for you to hear from Salma what this is about. And we've asked her to do it, sort of the example that she gives, to have it in geographies that we are currently working with. And then we're hoping that you can come back and tell us whether something like this would be useful, and whether we should host it on the hub, and what should be the design features. Because the other problem is how you present that to the community, right? So this is in Homa Bay County, we're doing a rapid climate risk assessment process. They will generate information and data, but how do you then present that to communities for them to be able to make sense of it? So just to help us think through that whole sort of process is what we're hoping you'll do. So with that introduction, I'll pass on to Salma, who is the Director of Science at Preserving Legacies. And I think, Salma, you'll tell us perhaps a little bit about the Preserving Legacies as well as you start. But over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks, Shahrin, Alexandra, for organizing this meeting. And I'm really happy to meet everyone here in this space. I'll share screen. I also shared my presentation. It's going to be very short. I want really mostly to show you the tool, but also to just present to you a little bit who I am, with whom I'm working, and why I think our values and approaches really connect to what you are doing in different places you work on. Can you see my screen? Just check in.
Yes, we see it now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I'm working in a project called Preserving Legacies, which is about locally led adaptation to heritage places, communities, and values. And when we think about, this is our team, we're actually based everywhere around the world, and including our team include local communities and also Indigenous peoples. Just to show you a little bit how I feel what we do connects to what you are doing, is that our vision is really a world where communities lead climate adaptation, safeguarding heritage, and redefining resilience. And when we talk about heritage, for us, it's very cross-sectoral. So its heritage values is why people give meaning to places around them. And it's really our mission is really to support through training, tools, and connections, equitably adapt communities, heritage places, and practices from climate change impacts. We work in different places around the world with communities and heritage custodians in different places, including Bangladesh and Togo and Benin, and new sites that have joined us. In Bangladesh, we work with Bagarhat custodians, and in Togo and Benin, it's Kutamaku World Heritage Sites. And we have principles that are very dear to our work, which are, we believe in value-based approaches. So we think that adapting values is more appropriate and feasible than adapting objects and attributes. We believe in community-centered and locally led, but also for us, it's very important to think about community co-ownership and validation of everything that is linked to adaptation and risk assessments. And we believe in diverse knowledge systems. So as much as we think the scientific knowledge system should be accessible, we believe that other ways of seeing and understanding the world are valid. And we don't have to validate them with scientific knowledge systems. This is how we see actually in all aspects, what does it mean weaving knowledge systems at a local level. Most of the time, the weaving of knowledge system happen at an expert level, and we think it really needs to happen at locally, including diverse voices. And along that, we found out that actually climate services were really not targeted to local communities, and even sometimes local authorities don't have access to climate services, and they are mostly targeted to bigger groups or national authorities and things like that. So we decided to do some work to make some climate data a little bit more accessible, usable by everyone. And we believe that this is, as Andrew clearly stated it earlier, this is one element of accessing climate data, and this can need to happen with collaboration with climate scientists and institutions, local universities. This needs to happen also through a better understanding of local indicators of climate change. So this is like one element that really lives within a landscape of diverse ways of exploring climate data. So what we think, and I think it's this like can relate to all of you today in this meeting, is that you have the capacity to build really a strong understanding of scientific climate data, and then to be able to create locally relevant climate communication materials that are easily understood and used by the communities you are working with. And creating these resources cannot happen at a higher level. It needs to happen through people that are connected to the communities they work with, but also that have stronger understanding of climate data. So we created these regional data hubs, which are actually geographic information platforms that are downloadable in your computers. For us, they have 4 or 5 qualities, which is they are accessible, they are localized, so it's a high resolution data. They are comprehensive in terms of climate data. They are already easily visualized, and also they live within a robust ethical framework. So we really believe that this data is not enough alone and need to align with local perceptions of climate risk, climate adaptation. And this is, I think, one of the strengths of this regional data hub is that we also align it with how we believe other ways of knowing and importance. So these hubs have historical data, including climate indicators and some climate, environmental, and natural hazard data, and future climate data. And I'll show you a little bit more what's in this. And it looks like that. I'll show you the example of the Africa Data Hub, what it looks like and how you can download it and use it. And we have, so this data hub for different regions around the world. So they can be downloadable, and then you can zoom in. You have a 1 square kilometer resolution, zoom into your local area and look at different climate indicators. These are examples of work that has been happening in Baggerhat, where there are historical data and future data for different climate scenarios, the middle of the road future climate scenario for 2060 and the pessimistic climate scenario for 2060 were used to compare what the changes of temperature that can happen in Baggerhat from historical times in the future. And these were used in a way to actually create conversations about what are we observing today and how this can translate to future hazards in the future. So I would really emphasize the fact that those are tools for building climate conversations. Other examples of difference here, for example, is the mean temperature of the warmest quarter in Baggerhat. This is the precipitation of the warmest quarter in Baggerhat for different scenarios, here going up to 2100. This is in Kutamaku in at the boundary of Togo and Benin in the northern parts of the countries, where you can see the maximal temperature of the month and how it is changing between different years under the same scenario, middle of the road. So these are just examples, and I want to show you how custodians have been using those. So they're using those data through focus group discussion, engaging communities, and having conversation and about how does that relate to what they're already experiencing today, and how this can actually help us better weave our knowledge today and the scientific knowledge in creating adaptation actions that are meaningful locally. There are reflection on adaptation through drawings. It's really weaved with other ways of doing. In Colombia, for example, they created a bingo game using this data to kind of like engage community in using and engaging with climate data. This is in Angkor, where communities were sitting outside and trying to imagine how their environment will change using these climate scenarios. And also reflecting with children, this is in Baggerhat, drawing what Baggerhat would look like in the future using these climate sciences. These are just some examples of how communities have used those climate scenarios and communities we worked with. And I just want to show you the platform a little bit. I think I still have a couple of minutes just to show you the platform, and then we can go into more discussion, deeper discussions, questions, etc. So let me just share again my screen. So this is what it looks like. It's using QGIS, which is an open source geographical information system. And actually what's what you have is that you download. Can you see my folder? Yes. Okay. So you have a folder. Like, for example, this is the regional data hub Africa that you open. And within this, you already have all the data created and you have a QGIS project. So this QGIS project, you click on it. And when you click on it, this is what you see. You already have all the data within it. You already have a starter of like how you, the visualization of the data. And you have different type of data within the space. You don't have to go and get the data. It's already all done, and the step that you need to do is downloading QGIS and downloading the folder with the project. And so within historical climate data, for example, it links to some online database that we couldn't get here, which are, for example, Think Hazard Data, Meteoglue, which are really great to get a historical data. So there's like a reminder here, and there's a training along that go deeper on those types of data. And then you have bioclimatic variables, which are data that can be easily relatable by communities. For example, the warmest months, the temperature of the warmest month, the temperature of the coldest month, the precipitation of the wettest quarter, or the precipitation of the wettest month, the precipitation of the driest month. And you can see those here, and you can really zoom in to where you are and have like a 1 square kilometer resolution available. And those same indicators, you have them, there's additional, in historical, there's additional data, there's sea level rise data and water data that was taken from the aqueduct database of data. And there's shoreline change data, but it's online. And links to this online data are available in the training. So for future data, you have the same bioclimatic variables that we've shared here. So like the temperature of the warmest month, you will have it for 4 different time spans, up to 2040, 2060, 2080, 2100. And each one of those, you will have them for a middle of the road scenario and the pessimistic scenario. In 2040, the pessimistic scenario is not doesn't exist, because the pessimistic scenario can start happening from 2060 up onward. So and within each of those, you have a file that actually contains 19 bioclimatic variables that are that align with this bioclimatic variable that I shared with you. So you can compare, for example, the precipitation of the driest months historically. You can link it to what people have been observing at present, and you can see what it will be in the future, what it could be in the future, because these are only scenarios. We are not predicting the future. We are just creating scenarios, possible scenarios, and think about how to adapt to them. So this is also a very important point to emphasize. All those scenarios, we don't know which one will happen. And the idea is to prepare for the worst, to have ideas of how to prepare for the worst and middle of the road. And this gives you a range of adaptation actions that can be adapted depending on what our path in the future will be, depending on the social, economic, political realities that we live in. I think I went through it. There's also climate, environmental, nature hazard data from the aqueduct for the future, different time spans, because each data provider use different data, and you have extreme sea levels and also shoreline change for different futures. So these are climate and also other environmental data that are related to climate change in different regions. I think I went through most of the parts. I hope it wasn't too long, and I'm happy to go deeper in, any aspects, questions you might have.
So Salma, just A couple of things. So first to say that this is accompanied by a training tool, right? So on the hub, but also in on the Preserving Legacies website, there is a
Open
tool that
source.
trains people on how to access it. And the second thing, Salma, actually, I was wondering, um, I'm going to throw you a bit of a challenge, but I know you're up for it. If you go back to your Africa map, we have work ongoing currently in Homa Bay, right? Homa Bay County in Kenya. So if you were to zoom into Homa Bay County, how would we sort of uh, first get to Homa Bay County and then start looking at, you know, yeah, basically what the major impacts are going to be. You're muted.
So within the hub, you have also background maps, which are like open source, Google hybrid
Yeah,
maps.
yeah.
And actually, I know Homa Bay because I was there. Like, I know it's not a place where people go for holidays, but I went there to a project. I think it's around the
Lake
lake.
Victoria. Yeah,
Yes, a little
yeah,
bit somewhere.
yeah.
Guide me. Wait. So where's Kenya? Here. It's a little bit
Rex, we're going to
somewhere
need you for
here.
this.
Yeah, it's below Lake Victoria where we have Mbita
North. So I am in the north of Lake Victoria. I'm at the border with
at the south of the Lake
south of
Victoria,
Lake Victoria. Okay.
Kenyan side.
Yes, I'm in Kenya. And so you can
Uh,
zoom in. So
So,
it's,
Kisumu, around about there.
yes,
Yeah, if you
there's
go to the
it's
coast.
already yeah,
Yeah,
it's Homa Bay. It's, you
there
can
you are.
hi, I'm
Yeah,
see.
here. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for example, this is Homa Bay. So we zoom in on it, and now we know that we are in Homa Bay, and we can go to the historic data. And let's say we want to know and to see. These are layers. So every time you want to see something, you click on it. So I click on historic and present data, climate indicators, and I want to see the coldest months, for example. So this is the data I'm seeing right now. And you can click on the information to directly have the temperature. And the coldest month in Homa Bay historically between 1970 and 2000 is around 15.4 degrees. So you can click and we can come back, or we can even bring the background map. But this is the data we have now. It's
So
this
if you
one
were to
square
say look
kilometer.
at temperature, oh, and can we do temperature and annual precipitation at the same time, or would we do it one by one?
It's one by one,
Okay, so
especially for this. Yes. So
let's
it
do
depends. For this one, it's, yeah. So for example, uh, what's in the training, what you do more specifically is that you will draw a polygon around the area you are interested by. So what it shows you, you can draw a polygon around Homa Bay. And what you do is you cut this data. So you're gonna kind of like clip the Africa data around the Homa Bay uh, boundaries you choose, or you can choose a little bit more, or like you choose the area you want. And then you have just the data for the area you want. You don't have, it's the same, that's what I showed you in the presentation here. You have, not this one, sorry. In the presentation, this, what we did here is that we clipped the data just within the area of interest for us.
and that is per square kilometer, is it? What's the
Yeah, so the data, for example, here, if I choose the temperature of the
warmest?
warmest month here, this square, if I go to information, sorry, just need to click on it. So here I have 1 square kilometer. This is a 1 square kilometer area. You can measure as well, like you can measure the areas, but every little square is a 1 square kilometer.
Right.
So here I have 29 degrees
Yeah.
for the
And
warmest month in here.
If you go to future data there, then?
Exactly. So if I go to future, and let's look at 2100 for the worst case scenario, and I click, so I select my file, which is Africa in 2100 for the worst case scenario, which is SSP 5.85. Here I have all this data. So here I have all of them at once. This is the difference, is that the future data, I have it all. And the climate indicator, the temperature of the warmest month is the bio 5. So it's the number 5. And I have 34.1.
Right. So basically, this will generate, once you draw the polygon,
20 degrees different. Was it not? It's a 15 degrees difference increase, which is huge. But this is for the worst case scenario in Homa Bay. Let me recheck this one just to make sure we are looking at. So, but this is how you can do it. The best way actually to do it is to cut it down, to cut down. I think the best thing is to cut down where the area and have just the data for the area of interest. This is the most effective way on doing it.
Okay, that's great. So yeah, basically, I mean, we now sort of open up for reflections from our partners, and the intention would be to have this, but then either in some way as part of this or separately, to also have, you know, the data that you are generating as part of the enumeration, etc. I mean, after due process of making sure that we have community consent, etc., because I think that that's also going to be useful for people working in those geographies in future. So very much welcome your thoughts. And I think, Shireen, you've requested some people to come in with comments, yeah? So over to you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you, Anju and Salma. I think it was very interesting. And I would, yeah, personally like to now download it. First of all, have GIS installed with my computer and play around with the database a bit. But yeah, Adnan, over to you. I was going to comment to you.
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you, Salma. Some quick questions just to clarify. So the data we have been using, you said it's QGIS. Are there any limitation to what GIS software you're using?
Yes, I'm using the open source one. So QGIS is one of the most powerful open source GIS software. You can take the data and put it in ArcGIS. If you're using ArcGIS, you can use it. The idea is that I created a folder, like if you have never used QGIS in your life, you can just download the folder and open it, and you have the visuals already there. You have already the data linked there, processed, and the link to the right data. Because, for example, for some of the water data, if you go and see their Excel sheets, it's super complex, and it's, you know, you need like I spent weeks of trying to understand what's the data about and showcase just visualizing the data that is meaningful, that can be meaningful for climate adaptation. So the data is there, and you can use it in other GIS software. It's as I showed you in the file. Let me share it again. I'll just share my screen again. So in this file, for example, the Africa Regional Data Hub, you have all the data already there. So you have, you can go to the folders here and all the data that is visible in your project is here. So for example, here you have all the data that is the future climate scenarios for Africa and the bioclimatic variables. So all the data, when you download the folder, which is a big folder, because we couldn't do it country by country, so we did it region by region, but like the Africa one is like 70 gigabytes. But with QGIS, it allows you, even with medium computer, not that powerful, to actually open it and use it. And you're welcome to take this data from QGIS and open it in another software. But I've chosen QGIS because it's the best open source GIS platform, in my view, that have so much training, support, community around it online. So you can actually learn how to use QGIS just going on YouTube and going through
I was asking because for our project we used ARC, and I don't know to what extent you have access to data regarding the Chittagong region for Bangladesh, but since our project was based there, the different climatic hazard, future scenarios, present scenarios, those data was collected, accumulated, and we did something similar. So I was also wondering, an extended question to my GCA colleagues, if we want to accumulate those data under one platform, how should we go about it? Should we share those data with Salma or you guys? Or is this something we can mix and play regarding refining the data sources we created? So that was top of my head, the question I was looking into. Like what's the best way forward in accumulating and playing with the different data sources we have?
I would say it depends on how do you want this data to be accessible. ArcGIS is not accessible to everyone. It's like one of the most expensive GIS platform. You can take all the data from QGIS and put it on Arc, as if you are using Arc and feel more comfortable using Arc. And you can just take it and put it in Arc. It's already available on the folder. But if you want all the data to be used by people, you want to engage with people who don't have access to Arc, then you can take your rasters, point files, any type of data you have on Arc, and you can put it on the QGIS project. Is as you feel is best for you. So it's really a choice, depending on, I think, what's the easiest and how you want to use this project, this geographical information project. Arc is great. It's super powerful as well. The only issue is that it's not open source.
I have another question, but Sharon, please.
No, just to add on that, Adnan, so we had this conversation with Salma earlier, and she confirmed that we can also incorporate socioeconomic data that we collected from field within this database. For example, household level data on income and expenditure, migration, etc. So yeah.
That was my third question. How do we incorporate socioeconomic data? Thank you, Sharon. I'll come back to you guys.
So, and also to say that we are just currently in the process starting that conversation with the people who design the hub to see how much of this we can take on. So, Salma, for instance, I don't know if it's ever possible that people don't have to download the whole database, right? But they can directly from the hub create the maps that they want. So, I don't know if that's technologically possible, but that would be the idea.
Complex. It's very complex for them directly in the hub to I think it's a bit complex, but it's feasible because lots of platforms provide data that you can download. The issue is that when you download data, you never download a map. You download an Excel sheet with a lot of numbers, and then you need to put them somewhere to visualize them. There are no platforms today where you can go on a map and from the map create a nice map, a visual, and have it and use it. What you can do is do a screenshots. Yeah. But screenshots don't have scales, don't have, all these important elements that you lose in a screenshot. But maybe we don't need to have a scale because we just want to have the map of what temperature do we have where. So I think it's really linked to that. But I think it's a bit challenging, the technicality. Maybe you can go on the hub and look at the data and be like, okay, and take notes of it and then reuse it. But I think creating a map online would be a little bit challenging.
Okay, but there is nothing that prevents us from putting data on from our projects onto the same database, right? Because it's firewall, so it's not, yeah, yeah. So we
Exactly.
can
The
use exactly the,
QGIS, yes,
yeah.
and when you download, like it's a shame it's regional and big, but when you download it, then you can create your own just local data from all this data and then delete the Africa data and just keep your very localized data, which will be like a 1 GB project, and then you can share it more easily. So, but for us, we didn't have the capacity to have more localized, like one data hub for each country, which,
Yeah.
you know, if we did have, it would have been easier for download. But it's I think we can think also about providing the data on a USB stick. Like this is what we're doing also with sites that are not able to download, or just, you know, managing with them, like, can you go somewhere and have a download over the night? Like one night download most of the time could work in a place where you have internet. So we can also think about, like, how do you download this, and when you download it, you have it, so you don't have, you know, it's there, you have it on your computer and you can use it, explore it on your own time. And
Yeah, I think Selma, we may have lost her.
Yeah.
Meantime, can I come in again?
Yes, sure, go on.
Anju, like just a quick, maybe lack of understanding from my end, but let's say for Lake Victoria, we have existing data source that might not match with what Salma found in her research. If it contradicts, how do we come about coming to a single path where the data matches or a middle ground? Have we thought about that?
So basically, what you're saying is if we want to upload data to the same source that contradicts
Yeah,
what's already there.
yeah.
Selma, are you back?
yes, I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't get the question. Sorry.
So so Adnan, maybe you want to ask the question again, but just to sort of say that I think you're talking about observational data, whereas
Mhm.
Salma is talking about past and future, right? So it's not.
Not
Oh,
not
go
so
ahead.
much.
You ask. Yeah.
It's the same on you. Like not so much on observation because the work Chittagong University did was collect also past, present, and future data as well. So Salma, the question was that if we have through our independent research collected a data from a certain area that might contradict with your data, what would be the best possible way to come to a middle ground regarding the mismatch of data if that sort of cases arises?
Okay, so my data is not mine, it's the word claim data. All the data that is on the data hub are data coming from a very good data provider, including WordClaim, and a couple more. And those data are the one used for IPCC. And I clarify exactly which model is in those data because it's one model that is used, and maybe the model doesn't align with all regions, but it gives you I think the strength of it is it gives you ideas of possible future that you can use when thinking about adaptation and nurturing conversation with communities about, okay, now we have 10 times more cyclones that we had 20 years ago. What could happen in 50 years? Will we have 20 more cyclones? How can we adapt to it? And in these 50 years with a pessimistic scenario, would we have 30 more cyclones? What we do with that? Do we need, how do we adapt to that? So it's this kind of nurturing this reflection. It's not about this is the precise temperature we're going to have in the future. These are models are, and in the training we really discussed that models are limited, but it gives us the opportunity to reflect on future scenarios based on the best future scenarios and future projections that are available today in the world. So, and all the sources of data are described in the training. So all the climate, bioclimatic and indicators are coming from the word claim data, which I'm going to share with you in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And yes, if there's, I think, like if you're, collecting data locally with the climate data, with the, weather station that is working, and you find out that there's a little, it's not the same. Yes, of course, your data that is developed locally is better than models. I think then when you have modeling and the future projection are very different, like you have a future projection telling you there's 10 more degrees and one telling you there is one more degree, a huge difference, then I think it's important to just question the both models and be like, what's, why my models are not the same. But I for me, all this accessibility of having communities like what we observed with preserving legacies is that when you have a heritage practitioner, so these are people who are working with heritage preservation, working with living heritage, with communities that are like their livelihood is their heritage in a way. And when those communities feel empowered, reflecting on their futures on their own, and having this access to climate data through different ways, maps and discussions and facilitating these discussions, actually it changes, the way they, even if I don't like this word, the climate literacy of these communities changed, and they felt really much more empowered in talking about future in different ways that they were used to. And I think it's not about the precision, it's more about the process of thinking about the future and imagining different futures with the best data we have today, globally.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Of course, you're welcome.
So I have a quick question regarding the second phase, actually, the training. So I'm sure you've had experience of training either, locals, community mobilizers, or maybe some university students in some of the African countries or even Bangladesh. So what have been your experience in that? In which areas did they struggle in understanding and visualizing or even using that going forward on their own?
So with my experience, you like it or you don't like it. So maybe not all of you will like it, but like maybe someone in your team, it's something that they are interested by. So for each site we worked with, and we had 4 pilot sites this year. We had one person within the team that was interested in developing skills in GIS and who got into it. And so I think it's also linking to like in your teams, maybe there's one person who have the time to engage a little bit with QGIS and who is interested in having this as a skill for their own, career path. The engagement with climate data was amazing. Like all our custodians, even if you have one who would produce the maps, all of them then have discussion about what these maps meant. And then there were a lot of reflection on from hazards to indicators. It's very different what you observe on the ground, like the flooding, the heat waves, and the indicators of the climate temperature, the maximum temperature of the warmest mountain. So this, how do you connect these two? Was a very key important aspects in discussion with communities. So, okay, so I have the indicator projected, I have the maximum temperature in the future, how this would translate into climate hazards. And this is part of the training, is really linking the realities of what's happening in the ground with these climate indicators. But I would say this was my experience with each place we worked with. There were one person that sees that as a training that would support them, and it was also a person that was interested by creating resources and materials to discuss that with communities, like creating a game to discuss climate data, and these are creations that are not specific to your place, that can be used in your country, or like having those discussions in Bangla, having some tools about future projections, some maps that are translated to Bangla, and those resources can be used, for example, yes, in Oma Bay, but maybe in other Kenyan places, because you are developing from those data tools that are communication tools that can support you discuss with your communities within your cultural framework these aspects, because not all cultures feel comfortable talking about future. or about future scenarios and predictions. So you are kind of like, for me, the people in this team, in this discussion, in our meeting, will be kind of like the knowledge brokerers within a cultural, meaningful space of climate data. So I would say, yes, you need to want to engage with it a little bit. And then what Andrew proposed, you can maybe just see the data and not create. But I think this area of creating maps or creating visuals and seeing how this can be useful for your climate conversation to make communities feel very comfortable understanding what this means and how they can imagine future is really powerful.
Ian, over to you. Ian?
Thanks, Andrew. My network is tripping. Probably what I want to ask might have already been addressed. Apologies for that. But I wanted to find out if this model for this tool that we are using is can also work together with other tools. Because already, I think as we use another GIS platform, which is a social tenure domain model, and which is being used under the Global Land Network tool for us to capture data and also represent it and produce also, I think, tenure documents out of it. So this model for quite a number of information which can also be useful in this process. So I wanted to know whether this tool is also friendly or accommodates or work closely with that kind of a tool that also exists. It's also using QGIS, it is open source. But I also wanted to know, but from the Zambian perspective, since we are also trying to do some adaptation plans, we see an
Shaheen, did we lose Ian?
Yeah.
Did you understand clearly the first question? Was it Kobo Toolbox they were talking about?
He mentioned a particular tool that they're using and wanted to know if it's compatible.
Was it Kobo Toolbox? Did you hear the name?
So.
They use Kobo Toolbox.
Yes. It's compatible. All the data you collect in Kobo Toolbox, they have, if you take the geographical position, so latitude and longitude. So for example, it's used for questionnaire. We have used it with communities, and I can show you a map.
So just a second, Salma, before you answer the question, I want to make sure he's there. Ian, are you there?
No, he just joined back.
Maybe Ian, are you back? Maybe not. Why don't we go to Rex and then you can come back and answer this one, Salma?
All right.
I think
Rex,
Ian is already back.
Ian, are you back?
Yeah, apologies. I think the network here is just bad. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was saying in Zambia, I think we see an opportunity to use this data for the scientific part of the vulnerability and risk assessments that we will do as we are preparing the adaptation plans for the villages where we are working in. So, but then I think from the discussion that we have had, I didn't quite get how then do we sort of do the ground truthing? How do we strike a balance between what is actually collected on the ground by the communities?
Okay, and so Ian, your first question was compatibility with Toolbox, and the second question is compatibility with the data collected by communities. Salma, over to you.
Yes, I wanted to show you actually an example, but I'm trying to find the data. So in Kutamaku, for example, just to respond they used Kobo Toolbox to go in within each of the takienta. So in Kutamaku, it's a World Heritage Site where communities create an earthen building. And those earthen buildings are very specific, very have a high value. And so they went to each house and they took photos, they took information about the family, they took information about the state of preservation of this building, and they used Kobo Toolbox to do that. And with Kobo Toolbox, you can take the geographical position of all your discussions or, whatever you have in your questionnaire. And those you can bring into QGIS. So any data that have a geographical position, any data that have a latitude and longitude on the Earth can be brought in QGIS. This is anything. So you can bring all the information, which is most of the time point information. So you have points, and within each point you have data about your community, maybe the houses, each house. You have the number of families. They can tell you maybe some information about how climate hazard have impacted them. You can also maybe have some information about what adaptation, individual home-based adaptation action they've been doing to adapt to what's happening. And you can have all this directly in your in QGIS. It's actually any data you want to visualize geographically, you can have it on QGIS. So I think this is how you can bring in local observations with scientific predictions in relation to climate change in one space. Very easily done. I'm trying to find the example from Kutamaku to show it to you, but
also, Salma, maybe the second question, which I think was similar to Adnan's, about reconciling the data collected from communities.
So for me, it was, so what do you mean by the data collected by communities? In what format?
Kobo Toolbox. So
Yes.
Ian, do you want to expand on that?
So anything in Kobo Toolbox can be uploaded in QGIS.
So yeah, I think Ian, the question that Adnan asked was perhaps the one that you were asking, that how do you reconcile differences between what's there and what communities collect? So Salma, I don't know if you want to, Ian, was that right? Was that your question? I think we may have lost Ian again. So let's, Salma, go on to Rex, and then we can come back to Ian when he comes back. Rex, over to you. Thanks for waiting.
Thanks, Salma, for the very insightful presentation and all the different data. What I wanted to ask is mainly how can we be able to download this data and we just have it within our computers? It's very relevant to what we're doing, and from the discussion, I think we're able to also come in and add the data that we've collected in the socioeconomic surveys through points, and also just through showing what the community has said using different points and different visualization techniques in the specific areas, maybe just overlaying it over the data that you've presented. And my question is just to ask, where exactly can we get this data, whether we have to go through the training for it to be released, or it's easily downloadable from a specific website. Thank you.
Thank you, Rex. It's not yet online. I'm just finalizing it, but it should be online very soon. I should have Dropbox links to it. That would also be on the LLA website. And with Andrew and the team, we are also working on trying to find a way to have the data visible in the LLA hub. And the training, I'm actually right now working on it. It will be available by end of April. And the training will be, so you will have slides and videos on YouTube that are available, going through the data hub, going through different elements of plural knowledge. And actually one of the elements was what Andrew's talking about, how do you reconcile future data with what people perceive? And I think this is through discussion. So, for example, I think you can, in our framework, what we do is we use present historical data and people observations, experiences, and we try to see like where they intersect, how communities relate to climate data indicators. And this is a way to build trust also with climate scientific data. So it's like the starter point. And when the starter point is strong and solid, then you can present future projections and discuss how do you see adaptation to these future projections? How do you see what you're doing now efficient? Will stay efficient in this temperature? What are the limits to adaptation? And you can have discussions about adaptation based on data with communities. But I think this is how reconciliation, prioritization happen. It happens through discussions and conversations, and having ways to prioritize actions based on having a better insight of future scenarios. But you can have all the data in one space. I think conversations are necessary to decide of actions based on this data. I don't know whether I responded or.
Yeah. And also, Rex, to your other question, we are currently figuring that out, right? So basically what Salma said is that if you're using, for instance, Kobo Toolbox, in theory, it's possible to bring it onto the same platform. So what we hope we'll have is another layer of what the community observations are, right? That we can sort of add on there, and also the data that you're collecting on socioeconomic, demographic, all of that, right? So that's kind of at the point that we are at on figuring out how we reflect these different elements on the same platform. But Rex, it'll be great to hear from you maybe later, if not now, because you've just been through that exercise of having somebody come and present climate risk assessments to the community, right? So a bit of reflections of how they did that, like what were the kind of visualizations that helped, etc., would be great. But we have Frederick waiting, so I'll give you some time to think about it if you want to come back with any reflections on that. Frederick, over to you. So it'll be great, please, if you can introduce yourselves, because Salma doesn't know where you're from.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Salma. My name is Frederick. I'm working from Rwanda on GCA project. So we are also supporting a district to develop people adaptation plans. And we are yet to do climate risk assessment, but led by the community. By doing so, we do a kind of enumeration. So I'm quite interested with this innovation in terms of the QGIS, in terms of providing relevant weather climate information. So it is important for our side to include the geographic location for each enumeration that we'll be doing. Again, with socioeconomic aspect, so that they can be integrated into your work. I mean the QGIS. Then from there we can navigate easily different scenarios. But my question is about maybe how do we get historical data in terms of climate change hazards that happened in the past? Then they can be maybe compared to climate information that happened in the past. Then from there, I think your model can be able to predict what can come, what can happen in the near future, because it is well fed with enough information in terms of climate information, as well as climate hazard that happened in that specific locations. Yeah, that is what I wanted just to hear from you, my perception. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. So the historical data that's on the hub from WorldClim is between 1970 and 2000. So it's like really historical. And then you have the present. I put on the hub a couple of websites that are very interesting in having like the historical data. One of them is Meteo Blue. I'm gonna share my screen just to show you what it shows as data. And just share screen. Okay. So this is what it looks like that. You can put your location, like we can put Homa Bay County, and it gives me yearly temperature change in Homa Bay from 1970 to 2024. And these are really good data because it's yearly data, it's each year. And those are good because you can have discussion with communities. Maybe, you know, in Homa Bay in 2016, 2017, there has been a really huge increase in temperature that maybe have affected crops, have affected. And this historical data help creating a kind of like hybrid historical data connecting scientific data and stories of communities and their life in how this has affected them. And it has also some data about precipitation. So this is like the historic and present. And I think it's very interesting to bring those maps and discussion around them and create hybrid data that's engage with scientific data, local perception, maybe local calendars, how things has been shifting, and creating a more holistic view of climate change perception in an area. This is kind of like a way to also create trust. Maybe some communities have never seen this type of data. Some maybe they have never seen that between 1972 and 2024 there has a trend of decrease rain, but they know about it. They know about it because they experienced it, and you can actually kind of like create the link between this. What the data shows and what people experience, and this is helpful in as you were saying, in projecting the future and seeing what different futures are possible, going through different scenarios, because you can be okay, so what would be my mean yearly precipitation in 2060 for a middle of the road scenario or for a pessimistic scenario, and communities can relate to what this will feel for them and what this will be seen in their local context. So yeah, just wanted to share. These are, for example, some exercises that we did in terms of like building trust between local perceptions and local knowledge of climate and scientific knowledge before going to future visioning, because there is really a need to better understand what the data shows us and what people experience in the present, and grounding this understanding and creating a new knowledge that is hybrid, that is connecting different knowledge systems in the present, and then bringing it back, bringing it in the future using scientific climate projections.
So, Salma, we've actually just been through that in two places, in Homa Bay and in Chattogram, right? So maybe Rex and Maureen, you can come in a little bit and reflect on how that process went, what could have been, added to it, what worked well, and then we'll invite Adnan to do the same.
Thank you, Anju, for the opportunity. So, for us, we got the past week we were doing a community consultation on rapid climate risk assessment, where we were able to share together with the communities on what we've been able to observe. We mapped the different assets within the community, worked with the communities together to map the risk areas, or what are the areas that are prone to flooding, just having them draw on maps what are the specific areas that they've been able to observe floods over the past few months, what is the history of flooding within the area, and just getting to understand from their point of view what are the areas that are affected adversely by floods, whether there's a climate phenomena that has come up that was not there in the past, whether there's an year where they experienced a bit of difference from the other years. So we were able to collect data based on that, normal perceptions from the community, and maps drawing out and outlining the specific areas that have been affected. And I feel also with this data, the data that we had was mainly for the past We had no future modeling at the moment when we were sharing with the communities. So if we would also have had this, it would have been a great addition to be able to also just share with them. This is what has happened. This is what you've shared, and this is what science is, and these are the models that have been done to predict the next few years. What do you think about it, and all that? And, that's just a snapshot of what we were able to gather. Thank you.
Thanks, Rex. And you used maps basically as visual tools, right? That I think is what you said.
Yes, yes, we did. Yeah,
Yeah,
we used maps.
good. So Adnan, do you want to reflect a bit since you've also recently been through the process?
Sure. So this is something similar to what Rex did in their projects. So we had, if I can make it very simple, a three-step process. The first step was a community consultation where we went in with a blank slate, trying to figure out the problems surrounding climate change issues. For most of them, they're aware, but for some of them, it's still the language, the iteration of how they perceive climate change differs from certain slum areas to certain different informal settlements in our project area. So our first job was to figure out their understanding, and through the different ERA applications we used, we were able to determine the past, present scenarios of that, the different LICs that were part of the project. Um, a part of that was then to draw or visualize the different working areas, different slum areas uh, the people are living in. And the interesting bit was that through their information, they were able to chalk out actual maps of their living space. And we were able to put in data regarding, for example, water sanitation hygiene facilities in those areas, the pathways, whether there are pipe water networks, for example, areas that are highly impacted by flooding, areas that are highly impacted by rainfall, salinity intrusion, and the list goes on. So we were able to visualize and draw the actual transact maps as the second process. Then the university partner, they were tasked with creating the GIS files, and they, of course, used the data from the PRA participation tool we used. At the same time, with the open access info, secondary literatures, the data that already exists, we were able to, through extrapolation, we were able to predict the future scenarios in those areas. That's why I asked the question, like if you're using existing IPCC models in your area, the way our university partner did it, there could be or some discrepancies in how we visualize those data. Anyway, so we chalked out different hazards, different scenarios, and we were able to draw maps of those different working areas, including the past, present, and future scenarios of the different climate impacts. What then we did was rank the highest possible hazard scenarios that are impacting the least income communities in those working area. And we rank the top three most vulnerable communities. And eventually what we will do is cross-check the data, and we'll go into in-depth data collection process and kind of validate that data through a participatory approach. At the same time, we will validate that data with the local government to come up with the people's adaptation plan. So that's the idea in a nutshell, but it's a very long iterative process. And of course, people's perception varies in the different low-income communities. At the same time, access to data also kind of impacts the results we want to see. It was very interesting, Salma, that how you went about it. I wish we had met before, then we could have included some things in our project as well, but let's see how it goes. Anju, over to you.
Thanks, Adnan. And on that, Salma, actually, what I would like to request, I know you said that it's not going to be online in for a while yet, but
No, the data can be online. I can share it with you like in
yeah.
tomorrow
But
for Africa
yeah,
and Asia. It's just the training.
yeah. Like for instance, I can see in Rwanda, it would be really good to have this available soon, right? So if there's a way we could figure out to make those maps available for the districts in Rwanda that we're doing the people's plan, that would be really useful. So actually, would it be possible for you to share the link to the data already so people can play around with it? And
I can for Africa. Yeah, I can do. I can share the link this week. I just need to upload them in a Dropbox. I think I've already shared the link for Africa, but I updated it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And then, so definitely projects that currently are in a stage where this would be useful, I think, are Rwanda, in Bangladesh, rather it would be the smart cities projects, right, where we need it. Zambia, Ian, you've already asked questions. I don't know what stage you're at, but again, this is something that we can provide for there. So yeah, if you could sort of just share that folder, that and then we can sort of so they can use it in parallel and don't have to necessarily wait till we make it available online, because I think that would also then help us figure out our design, right? So and how we put it out.
of course,
Good.
of
Yeah,
course.
excellent.
I just want to jump in on if we have time.
Yes, we do.
On the comments from David, I think they're super important, and also I actually this is what you've shared with us, Rex and Adnan. It's very similar to what we do. I think they're like maps and visuals are the key to having these conversations. I think it's important to also have this separation between discussing the present and the future, because the future needs a little bit more emotional support and it's like a bit more challenging, and it's really nice to ground the understanding in the present before moving toward the future. I think what David said is very important, and I was wondering, how do you engage in your conversation about vulnerabilities? I don't know which framework of risk you use, but what we use in terms of understanding risk and impacts is the IPCC one. So you have the hazards and you have the vulnerabilities, which include social, economic, political, psychological, like the context where the hazards happening. The exposure, we also look at exposures. Maybe some places are exposed just temporarily, or some are exposed like in terms of temporality and in terms of geography and space. And we also look at responses, because sometimes, like for example, in some of the sites we were at, you don't see the impact because people are already responding. So it's not, if people were not already doing something, it's if adaptation was not already existing, we would see more impacts. So when we assess risk, we first try to understand why are the impacts what they are, because sometimes maybe the impacts are not visible because people have been working very hard in adapting, and it's like invisibilized adaptation because it's like everyday things happening that we don't see, and we felt that these are really important to highlight. So sometimes you see lots of impact, and this is maybe the vulnerability is very high and there are no responses, but in some places you also don't see much impacts because people are responding. And so when we discuss hazards and risk in terms of planning for adaptation, we always in the present, when we're discussing the present, we also say like, what are the hazards? Okay, like let's understand the hazards, see what the science says, and this, and then we talk about the impacts. What are the impacts? What are we experiencing? And then why? Like we really explore the why. Why are we not, why are we not responding, and try to understand, is it like mainly because we are not aware, or mainly because our government is not supporting something they should have been doing and they didn't do it? Is this, so what are the key vulnerability elements? Because I think when then you look at adaptation, you target why the impact is what it is. So we try to kind of like support adaptation planning by better understanding why are the impacts what they are. And this helps better target whether we need people to be more aware, or we need to develop new tools, or we need to look at new ways of doing. They need to adapt the way they practice it, because they can't find this flower anymore that is very key to their practice. How do they adapt to this, to their cultural practice, for example, because the flower cannot bloom at these temperatures now, and this kind of examples. But I think one thing that we really try to bring in more is what adaptation is already happening, because what we're observing is there is locally, at local scale, at least for heritage places, there are a lot of adaptive practices already happening that are not elevated in global discourses or in those discourses in general. And how do we make sure that those adaptations that are happening stay efficient in the future, how they can change, and things like that. So I was just wanting to kind of like know a little bit more how in terms of discussing impact, do you explore also these elements of vulnerabilities that David just shared, which I think are very important, because it helps us better target adaptation. Maybe the main adaptation thing is to have a policy to support more action on the ground, or so it's really thinking about these different aspects of adaptation, and yeah, just elevating a little bit more the soft adaptation, because soft adaptation is a little bit invisible in comparison to hard adaptation. So yeah.
Absolutely. So we use the IPCC framework within the SDI methodology, right? So it's that whole process of enumeration, data collection on socioeconomic, demographic, or the whole thing, right? And then sort of analyzing that, taking it back to the community. So David, thanks for sharing as well. But I don't know if you want to come in. We've got 5 minutes. But
maybe just very, very, very briefly to say thank you, Salma. Yeah. We draw on the IPCC definitions, etc., and we've used various different models in different contexts. But I think one of the things that we start with is an analysis of livelihoods. We try to get a very good overall broad picture of what is needed for people to flourish, what are their understandings of well-being, and what is that good system, what is the normal good system that they aspire to. Once you started with that, then you can start to explore how hazards can impact that, how they can impact the activities that people can do, the inputs they need, all of these various different other aspects. Another thing that we do, and totally agree with you, adaptation, existing adaptation, is a really, really important part of that process. So you have to look at, so what are you currently doing? How successful is this? What are the impediments to this? What could be done that would make this adaptation strategy more successful? For example, by the government, what could be done by, the community members, etc. So what are the limits to that current adaptation strategy? And what could actually empower them even more to do what they're already doing? So I think that's a really, really important part, and we do that as well. I'll stop it there. We don't have much time, so just a couple of comments.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, everyone. So, Salma, thank you for your time. Really grateful, and really, really look forward to making this available, because as you can see, people really do feel the need for this tool, right? So, as I said, we'll be in touch. Did you want to
as
come
action, just action point for me, I'm going to share with you the data for Asia, mostly Bangladesh. You have it, but I will share the new one for Asia and Africa.
Yes, please.
I'll share the links to those. I have part of the training. It's just we don't yet. I have the slides, so people can go through the slides if they want to. I can make some available slides for viewing. It's just there is no one explaining what's on them, but they can read through them. And there's no video showing how to use QGIS yet, but this will happen soon.
There, I have a suggestion, and I'm going to challenge my colleagues in this case, that we have one person in Bangladesh and one person in Africa from the LLA teams work with you and understand how to use it, so that they can then help the national teams to do it, right? So we'll figure out a way. Well, it'll be great if you share that presentation, but also if we have somebody who's actually learned how to do it, then they can pass that on. So we'll do that for now, because that'll also help us develop the training with you for the hub, right? For us to get a better understanding of those processes. So thank you so much. And yeah, really looking forward to taking this forward with all of you. Please send us, if you've not spoken today, do feel free to send us your comments and suggestions and reflections on how we can make this useful. Do share your ideas also for future discussions like this. Shireen will be in touch soon with others that we have planned. But have a wonderful rest of the week. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Anju. May I ask everyone
right,
to
thank
please
you.
turn on your camera, please, to take a group photo if possible?
Sorry, my camera has a problem. I don't know what's happening. I've been trying to figure it out. So.
No problem, no problem. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. And we will be having our next peer learning session, hopefully by the end of this month on 30th. It would be another exciting one on developing heat action plans, which is again very important for all of us working in urban informal settlements. So yeah, I'll be in touch with you on that very soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
You.
Thank you. Bye.